what did Amaziah do that kindled the anger of the Lord? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Chronicles on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verses 1 to 16. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Chronicles chapter 25, beginning at verse 1. Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoaddan of Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a loyal heart. Now it happened as soon as the kingdom was established for him that he executed his servants who had murdered his father the king. However, he did not execute their children, but did as is written in the law in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, saying, "The fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall the children be put to death for their fathers, but a person shall die for his own sin." Moreover, Amaziah gathered Judah together and set them over captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, according to their fathers' houses, throughout all Judah and Benjamin. And he numbered them from 20 years old and above, and found them to be 300,000 choice men able to go to war, who could handle spear and shield. He also hired 100,000 mighty men of valor from Israel for 100 talents of silver. But a man of God came to him, saying, "O king, do not let the army of Israel go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, not with any of the children of Ephraim. But if you go, be gone, be strong in battle. Even so, God shall make you fall before the enemy, for God has power to help and to overthrow." Then Amaziah said to the man of God, "But what shall we do with the 100 talents which I have given to the troops of Israel?" And the man of God answered, "The Lord is able to give you much more than this." So Amaziah discharged the troops that had come to him from Ephraim to go back home. Therefore their anger was greatly aroused against Judah, and they returned home in great anger. Then Amaziah strengthened himself, and leading his people, he went to the valley of Salt and killed 10,000 of the people of Seir. Also the children of Judah took captive 10,000 alive, brought them to the top of the rock, and cast them down from the top of the rock, so that they were all dashed in pieces. But as for the soldiers of the army which Amaziah had discharged, so that they would not go with him to battle, they raided the cities of Judah from Samaria to Bethhoron, killed 3,000 in them, and took much spoil. Now it was so, after Amaziah came from the slaughter of the Edomites, that he brought the gods of the people of Seir, set them up to be his gods, and bowed down before them, and burned incense to them. Therefore the anger of the Lord was aroused against Amaziah, and he sent him a prophet who said to him, "Why have you sought the gods of the people who could not rescue their own people from your hand?" So it was, as he talked with him, that the king said to him, "Have we made you the king's counselor? Cease. Why should you be killed?" Then the prophet ceased and said, "I know that God has determined to destroy you, because you have done this and have not heeded my advice." In our last lesson, we had the completion of the reign of Joash, king of Judah. We found that while Joash is described as a righteous king, that didn't mean that he did everything right, nor does it mean that God approved of every action he took. Towards the end of his reign, Joash compromised with those in Judah and allowed them to set up shrines to their idols again and worship them there, a direct contradiction of the law of God spoken through Moses. The text doesn't say that Joash worshipped other gods himself, but as the leader of God's people, him deciding to compromise here was sinful, for he allowed the nation to go off into idolatry, which would most certainly incur God's wrath. And for this decision, God punished Joash by allowing the Syrians to come down after their attacks on Israel and defeat Judah, while injuring Joash at the same time. This wound was not unto death, but it weakened him enough that allowed some of his servants to come and assassinate him. With Joash dead, Amaziah his son reigned in his place as the 8th king of Judah. From our study of 2 Kings, we know that Amaziah took power in Judah in the 2nd year of Joash in Israel. This would place our date to around 794 BC. He was 25 years old when he began to reign and would reign 29 years in Judah, which would bring our timeline down to 765 BC, something that we'll represent by shifting the timeline up. Amaziah is said to have done that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but the chronicler says he did not do so with a loyal heart, while the writer of 2 Kings said he reigned not like David his father did. Both writers say that he is more comparable to his father Joash, who we know served the Lord in the beginning, but allowed idolatry to enter the land later. And from the rest of the chapter, we can see how this epitaph plays out, because some of the actions of Amaziah would be good, while others would be evil. Now, as we said earlier, Amaziah became king after a conspiracy was made against his father Joash that led to Joash's death. This explains why soon after the reign of Amaziah began, he executed the servants who had murdered his father. You see, no matter how bad a ruler is, we don't get the right to simply execute them. Joash was the Lord's anointed and so didn't deserve to be executed by these servants. However, Amaziah didn't execute the children of these conspirators, for the law of Moses said in Deuteronomy 14 verse 16 that children were not to be put to death for the sins of their fathers. Now, I find this quotation interesting here, for modern scholarship often places the writing of Deuteronomy as something written late, perhaps during the captivity, and not by Moses, and yet the actions of Amaziah are guided by the passage in Deuteronomy, and the writer of 2 Kings and the chronicler make an exact quotation of it. This type of behavior and the fact that Amaziah's father Joash received the book of the law upon his ascension show us that the law of Moses predates 2 Kings, leading further credence to the fact that it was written in the days of Moses. That modern scholars dispute this is of no real concern to me, as I believe they are wrong on a whole host of other biblical issues too numerous to expound upon here. The next thing the chronicler tells us is that Amaziah numbered the people, finding them to be about 300,000 choice men of valor, able to go to war and handle the spear and the shield. This is important for two reasons. First, it concerns that the simple act of numbering the people was not why God was mad at David for doing so back in 1 Chronicles. There was something more, and we discussed that something more was pride. Amaziah had a reason for numbering the people, which was that he was about to go to war with Edom, and therefore wanted to know the numbers of his army. Yes, Amaziah could go to war with Edom with any size army if God was with him, but knowing the size of one's army was not necessarily wrong, depending on what one did with that knowledge. The second thing we can notice is how much Judah's army had shrunk since the days of Asa and Jehoshaphat. From chapter 14, we found out that Asa had an army of 580,000, while from chapter 17, we found the army was 1.16 million during the days of Jehoshaphat. Amaziah thus had an army about 1/4 of the size of Jehoshaphat's army, a man who reigned over Judah just 50 years before. Why did Judah's army shrink? Simply put, because of sin. Jehoram and Athaliah represented about 15 years of purely evil rule, while Joash's 40-year reign was mixed, especially towards the end. Thus God allowed neighboring peoples to come in and defeat Judah, the toll of which are seen in these numbers. And we know that Amaziah was concerned with these numbers too, for he then hired 100,000 mighty men of valor for 100 talents of silver from Israel in order to fight his war with Edom. Remember, a talent weighs about 34 kilograms or 75 pounds, so in 2024 money, that would be about 3.3 million Canadian or 2.4 million US. Not a paltry sum, to say the least. However, what Amaziah did here displeased God, for again, Amaziah, like David, was placing his trust in numbers rather than God, appointed the prophet of God made to Amaziah. The prophet told Amaziah that if they went to war with Edom with the men of Israel, a nation the Lord was against, then Judah would be defeated, implying that if they went to war without the men of Israel, that Judah would be victorious, for God is able to do either. Amaziah was receptive to this argument, but he had a problem. He had already paid the troops from Israel a large sum of money. Was he able to get it back? The prophet told Amaziah not to worry about it, for God was able to give him that amount and more if he was faithful. And so Amaziah discharged the men of Israel, a discharge that angered these men. Why? Because in addition to the upfront payment, I'm sure these men expected to be enriched by plundering. Thus Amaziah was costing them even more money and goods. This, of course, led them to later invade some cities in Judah, killing about 3,000 and taking much spoil. For Amaziah, though, he defeated Edom, and that that doesn't mean that Edom was subjected by Judah again, for we know from other biblical passages that they were not. It is simply stating the fact that Amaziah had been victorious. This victory, however, came at a personal cost to Amaziah. For the writer of 2 Kings leaves out that after this victory, Amaziah brought back with him some of the gods of the Edomites and began worshiping them. Idolatry, of course, is an abomination before God, and so the man of God again came to Amaziah in the hopes that, like before, he could get Amaziah to change his ways. This time, however, was different, for when the man of God told him that the anger of the Lord was aroused against him for worshiping gods that had not delivered Edom into his hand, Amaziah was indignant. He basically said, "Who made you counselor of the king? Hold your tongue lest you be killed." And so the prophet did hold his tongue. But he did warn Amaziah that because of this, God had determined to destroy him. Now you might ask, why did Amaziah accept God's admonition before, yet reject it after? It appears that pride got in the way. Amaziah had defeated the Edomites, an act he likely attributed to his skill and strength rather than God's. Therefore, who was this prophet that he was going to tell him, a mighty king, what to do? This attitude befalls many successful people, and as Christians it is one we need to avoid. The plundering of his own cities, though, Amaziah thought he needed dealt with, and with his strong army, what better time to do it than right now? We'll cover this event along with the death of Amaziah, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verses 17 to 28, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.